Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Top 10 with Matt and Bryant. Today, we're going to be talking about the top 10 theme games. And Matt, how did you interpret a theme game?
A theme game. So what I try to look for is games that have a specific theme and try to integrate that theme into their mechanics. And then, of course, because we're doing a top 10 list, these would be games that I would actually recommend to people. So it's typically games that I've played in the past that I've had enjoyment of, and games that I feel like the theme actually comes through as you're playing the game.
Yeah, excellent. Very similar to what I outlined it into three metrics here. So I had level of immersion, which involved, it could be things like artwork, personal taste in genre. Sometimes it can be affected by your mood, your distractions. But I think more mechanically, how much focus the game involves, not necessarily complexity, but how much you're actually engaged with the game itself. So that would be my first one, level of immersions, all that stuff.
Right. Okay.
And then the mechanics and theme entanglement. So just like you were just saying there, how much does the theme and the mechanics actually work together? Like if it's really easy to reskin the game, then it's not, the theme isn't that deep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then one thing I found in common with all the games I was choosing, and it just occurred to me like right before we started, but it's the types of player interaction. I found that the games that I find the most, where the theme comes out the strongest, is where I have the most natural interactions with other players.
Okay.
So where people are acting like real people within the game, I found that involves a lot. It makes the theme stronger.
Yeah, fair points.
All right. Now, since last time you got the last word, I'll go for the last word this time, so you get to go first.
So I get to go first. Okay.
Because my number one's unbeatable, I think.
It's unbeatable. Okay. Yeah. I think my number one has a pretty strong theme integration.
Okay.
I'm gonna say it's and I will say, like, my number one is not like it's my favorite game that's on this list, because my favorite game that's on this list is actually lower on the list. But yeah, I feel like my number one integrates theme better than what my favorite game on the list
I agree.
is.
These weren't ranked necessarily how much I like them.
Yeah,
I like all of them, but it wasn't part of the ranking as much.
Yeah, they're all good games, but it's maybe not like my favorite game of all time, but it does the theme pretty good, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so to start off the list, my number 10 is a game called Code 3. Now, Code 3,
I know
the theme for Code 3 is kind of the 70s and 80s cop dramas, if you will, where it's two buddy cops and they're out on patrol together, and they're dispoing different calls and that. And you're working as a group. It's a cooperative game where you all play as a team of beat cops who are trying to finish off a goal, but also maintain control of crime in the city. I just played this game recently, actually, with my parents, and I had a really good time with it. I feel like the theme really comes through because your characters that you get all have different abilities in that based on what type of a cop they are. And as you're playing the game, it's a deck building game to some regard. But the deck that you're building has internal affairs, like IA heat cards is what they're called. But you can also get attaboys and commanding officer citations, and you go through training regiments, and those all get added into your deck with your basic officer cards. And then during your turn, you're eating donuts to move faster, and you're drinking coffee to take extra turns, kind of thing. And it's kind of that really quirky cop drama theme, and I find really comes through in this game. So that's where I put it. My number 10 is Code 3.
Excellent. Now my number 10 surprised me that I decided to put it on here, because I think it wouldn't normally be on a games list like this. And it has many names. We called it Scum, but it's also known as President or Capitalism. And it's just a basic card game, but you play with several decks of cards. You may have played it before.
Okay.
And what it is everybody has a rank. So you have somebody who's at the top dog, like the president or the king or whatever. They're always going to get the best hand, because whoever's in the lowest position has to give them their best cards. And then the king can slough off their worst two cards. It's a basic card playing elimination game. But the thing that fascinates me about it is playing this as like a teenager and stuff. It was incredibly immersive, because I think, and this is what I was just saying about how the player interaction affects the theme. So it's basically it's a game based on the structure or hierarchy of the players, and it's not meant to be fair. It's meant to, if you're at the bottom, you're trying to scramble up one rank at a time.
Yeah.
And if you're the king, you're watching that guy right next to you trying to take over your position, right? And so I found that I feel like the interaction between the players and how you play your hands and how you associate with each other for such a simple game, such very few mechanics, basically no artwork, no nothing. Without any of that, it's actually able to out a pretty strong theme.
Interesting. Yeah. It's a game I haven't played in a while. I knew it by a different name, which maybe
there's another name.
Isn't the best name.
Yeah,
but...
yeah, it has a lot of colorful names.
But yeah, I remember playing it. I played it in high school. Actually, we used to get to school early, and we would sit around and play a big game of it. And we had to have multiple decks sometimes because we had so many people playing it.
Yeah,
which is
it's
fun.
Have like 4 or 5 decks together. Yeah,
yeah, that's cool. That's a different take on it. Yeah, I wouldn't even have thought to put a card game like that on my list because
it surprised me too.
Yeah, when I think theme, I think like these big artworks and these storylines and all of that. But you're right.
That's why it's number 10. But I thought for such a simple principle, it carries that pretty strongly.
That's true. Yeah, and I hadn't thought of it that way, and it's interesting to hear you say it. So cool. Okay. Next on my list, my number 9 is a game called Bristol 1350. And it is a game from the Dark City Chronicles. I think that's what they call it. It's from Facade Gaming. And this company has made a bunch of social deduction games, but they're quite different than the normal social deduction games that I've been playing. One of the big features of their games is that on your turn, you essentially take one action. It's a very simple action that you take, but you are actually taking an action, and you go around the table kind of thing, and everybody takes one action. Well, in Bristol 1350, it is a game about escaping Bristol during the time of the Black Death, the plague, right? So what ends up happening is you're all on these apple carts, and all you're trying to do is escape the city. But in your cart, somebody else who's sharing that cart with you may or may not become infected with this plague. And if they're infected and you leave with them, they'll end up infecting everybody in your cart, and everybody on your cart dies, so you lose. So the entire game is this kind of constant struggle of figuring out who is safe to be in a cart with and who you want to kick off your cart and send somewhere else, to take your plague that way, kind of thing. If the game by nature is kind of a racing game because you have 3 different carts that you're moving across. And I just feel like the theme comes through in the game because you do feel that tension building, because every time a cart mingles, they trade their cards around, and now somebody new might have the plague. And so you have this kind of growing tension the longer the game goes, where it's like, okay, well, you were on that cart. How do I know you're safe coming to my cart? I've only been able to see a couple of cards in this game, and maybe you have too high of a card, and you're coming in here to spread this plague around to me, right? So that's where it hit my list, and it's really because of that feeling that you get as you're playing the game, that growing paranoia, if you will.
Well, it was set like the speaker would be big, but it wasn't embiggening me. And embiggens is a word. I learned that on The Simpsons.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so.
All right. So what's your number 9?
Yeah, it's interesting you picked that one because I went through a cycle of social deduction games. I feel like social deduction games, by their nature, have a pretty good theme, but they're not as they're more interchangeable, and I think that's why it's lower on my list. So I kind of went like Sheriff of Nottingham is a very basic social deduction, but it has a lot of real feel to it in terms of, is it more beneficial to lie or tell the truth in this situation, sort of a thing. Yep. But I ended up with Battlestar Galactica. And so Battlestar Galactica, you're on a ship, you're trying to escape the Cylons. Everybody has a crew. You're a specific member of a crew with a special ability. You have different roles, and you're kind of interplaying these roles. There's a lot of political elements to the game. You're trying to sift out spies. There's Cylons amongst your crew who may or may not out themselves at any time, or they might not be Cylons if you're in the first part of the game, but you think there are.
Yeah.
You're trying to manage things like riots, food shortages, water shortages. And so there's just a lot of elements in there that kind of make it feel like something's happening, right? Now, I think in terms of the specific, the sci-fi theme is pretty much tied to the intellectual property. It's based on the TV show, but I think you could reskin it somewhat. You could put it into a lot of settings. It would still work. And so I guess this is more of a genre pick than a specific game pick. I think any social deduction game has an innate sense of theme to it, but it's not It's lower on my list because they're not too hard to reskin.
Yeah, and I mean it's not the biggest problem that you can reskin a thematic game. It's still I feel like they're still thematic. It's just and I think Battlestar Galactica actually does incorporate that theme decently well into its mechanics.
Well,
because
yes, like the specific issues you're facing are specific to science fiction. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and yeah, you could argue that you don't necessarily need to have the IP. It could just be space robots and
True.
And whatever else, right?
You could change the names and characters easy enough.
Yeah,
yeah.
But I think you could do that with pretty much any game, right?
Yeah.
So it's really tough to find one where the theme is so integral to the game that that you couldn't reskin it somehow. But
yeah,
I think it's still, that's a great choice. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to number 8 on my list. Number 8 actually has a similar feeling in a game as my number 9 as Bristol does. My number 8 is a growing paranoia game, and it's the best way I can describe this game. It is called Who Goes There by Certifiable Studios. Great production value on this game. The game is essentially The Thing, the board game. So it's based on that old IP where there's this alien life form that can mimic humans and become a human. And what ends up happening in this game is, as you are playing through it, you are all surviving in this Arctic outpost. You're trying to build equipment so that you can survive through the harsh conditions, and you're also trying to find blueprints to take back on the helicopter so that you can fly them back home, right? But as you're playing this game, every time something goes really wrong, you take what's called a vulnerable card. Now, there are 12 vulnerable cards in the game, and one of those vulnerable cards will turn the person who takes it into the Thing. And the Thing's objective is actually to make it on the helicopter at the end with at least one human survivor so that they have a snack on the way home.
Right.
And it is a feeling that you get in this game where as soon as one person gets a vulnerable card, they now have a 1 in 12 chance of being a bad guy, but you don't trust them for the rest of the game. And because you don't trust them, you make stupid decisions where you might now become the bad guy kind of thing. So it's just this neat scenario where it's like, oh, something went wrong. Well, better draw a vulnerable card. Oh, are you the bad guy now? No, are you the bad guy now? And everybody starts off fully trusting each other, fully trying to work together, but then you start to hold resources a little bit as the game goes on because you're like, well, I don't really trust you anymore because you've been pulling from that bad deck. But yeah, that's my number 8. It's Who Goes There.
That's a really good pick, and I've played that, and I agree with you. I just didn't think of it when I was making this list. So it's a good one, though. I actually put one that we've talked about before, and that's Betrayal at House on the Hill. And I think I picked that one because it's exactly what it wants to be, and you can feel it. So it's a game. Yeah. It's basically a Scooby-Doo / Ghostbuster sort of a game. Very little concern for game balance or anything like that. And we've discussed this before. You really can't, if you tried to balance it, if you over mechanized the game, you'd lose a lot of what makes it feel its theme.
For sure. Yeah. You have to go into Betrayal just looking for fun.
It's an unpredictable haunted house. You never know what's going to happen. You could turn a corner and die, right? Yep. And that's what makes the theme. And the fact that one of you is going to turn evil at some point, but you don't know who, you don't know when, you don't know what their powers are going to be or what you're going to have to do.
Yeah.
Just adds a whole new depth to that. So I know a lot of people don't like, it's kind of a hit or miss. People seem to love it or hate it, but I think it's a lot of fun. But like you say, you have to just go in planning to have a good time, being okay if your character dies.
Yep. Yeah, you have to be okay with that roll just not going the right way for your character, and it just sucks sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, and then some of the haunts are very, very unbalanced, especially dependent on your exploration level. If you have a very small house versus a very big house, those haunts will play out differently.
What the haunt is, I've played the one where it's like your house is being sucked into the abyss.
Yep.
And obviously a very large house, that's much easier to win as a player than as a villain.
Right? Exactly. Yep.
A small household, the villains basically got it. But if you fixed that, if you made it so you always knew, if you knew the game was going to be balanced, you'd lose that theme.
Yeah, potentially true. Yep. Yeah. Cool. All right. Yeah, good pick. And I'm on the bandwagon of I really do enjoy Betrayal. So it's I love the replayability of it. You can you can play it 50 times and always have a different game.
And there's the expansion with 50 more scenarios.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to my number seven. My number seven is another game that we've talked about before. It's a game that I find to be very pretty, and it is Mechs versus Minions. Through Mechs versus Minions on my list, it is another game that I feel the theme comes through quite well. You are essentially these Yordles, is what they're called, and they are building mechs, and the mechs are quite chaotic. So during the beginning of your round of the game, you draw a handful of cards and you pick one of them to apply to a position on your program for your mech. And it's either a move card, an attack card, or a spin card. And every turn you are doing your entire plan of your robot, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. So it becomes very chaotic, and I feel like the chaotic nature of the Yordle race really comes through in that game. Plus, it's just really fun to be in these big mech suits and walking around and stomping on a bunch of minions. Which, if you've ever played League of Legends, which is the IP for this game, you know that the minions do kind of get stomped on in that game. So, yeah, it feels really great. I love the game, and yeah, that's my number seven is Mechs versus Minions.
And I thought of that one. It just didn't make it onto my list. I would call it an honorable mention for me. My number seven is a deck builder. Arctic Scavengers. So out of all the deck builders I've played, this one I found by far the most thematic. So basically you're like a little colony in this frozen, wasteland, competing with other colonies for, resources, tools, finding people to join your colony to help out, that sort of a thing. And I find it a lot more thematic. Like Dominion's a great game, but you don't feel the theme of Dominion or playing Dominion.
Yeah,
kind of putting
absolutely.
a bunch of decks together and you're just looking at what they do. Arctic Scavengers, I think of all the deck builders I played, I felt the theme the strongest. Just being a survivor in a frozen wasteland.
Yeah, I've played some Arctic Scavengers. I wasn't the biggest fan of the game, and maybe I need to give it another go here or there, but it was just, I think it was that battle mechanic at the end of the round where it's like you play some of your cards to do an ability, but then you can save cards to fight for one of the good cards at the end of the round or something like that. And that mechanic just didn't feel great to me. But I can understand where the theme is coming from for you. Yeah. And I do agree. It's as far as deck builders go, it's probably one of the more thematic ones.
And I wouldn't even say it's my favorite deck builder, but again, it's just the one I found the theme integrated the best.
Yeah, for sure.
With it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. My number six is a cooperative game. A bit smaller box, but it's kind of a crunchy game. It's a very puzzly game that makes you think quite a bit. It is called Set a Watch. The reason that I picked Set a Watch is really because of the camp phase of the game. I find it really neat, and it's one of my favorite parts of the game where you are a group of 4 adventurers and you are on a quest to find the monster's lair and defeat the monsters. So every night you have 3 people who go out on watch and they have to fight monsters, but you have one person who is staying behind at the camp and they are making sure that the camp is stable and they are checking the map so that you can know where you're going to go forward. And they are cutting firewood so that your fire doesn't burn out, because if you don't have enough light, you can't see these oncoming monsters that are approaching. The game at its core, like I said, is a puzzly game. You're going to roll dice. You're going to use the dice to use your character's abilities, or you're going to use the dice as direct attacks against these enemies that are coming through. But yeah, I also find, and it's something I've been meaning to mention while we're doing this list, that one of the things I find that helps in bringing themes into games is asymmetric player powers.
Yeah.
In the game Set a Watch, you pick your adventure, and your adventure is unique between you and the guy sitting beside you, right? If I'm playing a monk, I have monk-based abilities that feel a lot different than the guy beside me who is the trophy hunter, who is trying to, slay a monster, and he takes it as a trophy, and then he can use that in a future round kind of thing. So yeah, that's my number 6, Set a Watch, big awesome. Fantasy theme, and yeah, just love the camp aspect of it.
And I haven't played that one, but a lot of what you said reminded me of Robinson Crusoe, which I think also easily could have got on this list.
Yep. Yeah. Robinson Crusoe would be a good one. I haven't played it enough, so I can't fully recommend it. I think I've only played it once, so yeah, I'd have to dig more into it before I know how good of a game it is.
I have that one. Yeah. But it's not on my list. What is on my list is my number 6, Time Stories. Now, I don't know if you've played that one before.
Yeah, played through the first campaign.
Yeah, I've only done the first module because you have to keep buying the extra modules. And so this one, you're time travelers. So there's some sort of a mystery that you're trying to solve, and you're being assigned by some time travel company agency. I forget the details. It's been a while. But you're going back in time, and you have a time limit. So you can go back in time, and they can hold you back there for like an hour or whatever it is. And you have to go back and look through the game for clues. But if you don't solve the mystery in time, you're going to get sucked back to the present, and then they have to send you back again, and it gets progressively harder. But every time you loop back to the beginning, and you have to revisit the places you were just at, but try to go different directions trying to sort the clues out. So it's kind of like choose your own adventure where you can flip back and forth through the pages, but you have to keep track of what you've learned so that the next time you go, you can do everything more quickly, and you're not going to solve it on the first run. But the thing I think that makes it most thematic for, I think first of all, the design's really well good, like how they do the clues and how they hide the clues and how you piece them together is really good. But even just the urgency part of it, you kind of feel the time pressure, right?
Yeah.
Which is an important element of the theme of the game, is that you're really under a crunch, a time limit.
Yeah, it reminds me of another game that I have called Tragedy Looper. Tragedy Looper, yeah, your protagonists, which are 3 of the 4 players, it's an all versus 1 game, but the 3 players are going back in time and trying to prevent a tragedy. And one of the key things they say is don't lose the same way twice.
Right.
Right. So learn from your mistakes, and then yeah, if you're going to fail again, fail differently so that you learn something else.
Yes, and had I played that game, that might have made it on instead of this one. I love all versus 1 because I love being the one bad guy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I seem to remember a game of The Others, I think we played together. Yeah.
And I was thinking about putting that. It didn't make this list, but it could, I think, potentially. But yeah, I love being the villain. Even in Betrayal, I love it when I'm the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it bodes well for you being my dungeon master. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Betrayal, my number 5 is Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Oh, well, there we go. Crossover.
And I think that's where we're at now, right? Number 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, Betrayal. Betrayal was one of the games that got me into the hobby. When I was living in the Lower Mainland, some friends and I went out and we bought some board games and picked up a couple of them, and one of them was Betrayal, and we played it the first time. And that first game of Betrayal, I betrayed all of my friends by turning into a giant dragon and breathing fire on them. And I was like, okay.
I think that was also my first Betrayal. I think it was that same scenario.
Yeah, as soon as that happened, I was like, I'm sold. I'm in the board game hobby now.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably don't need to say much more about it. Betrayal at House on the Hill, fun game, and yeah, just go in with a fun attitude. And like you said before, it does what it wants to do. It feels like you're exploring a haunted mansion.
Yeah, excellent. Well, obviously, I agree with your choice.
Yeah.
All right. So my number 5 is actually my favorite game. It's not the highest on this list, but it is my favorite game overall. And that is Twilight Imperium 4.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it carries its theme super well. And it has a lot of the elements that we've talked about. So it's very asymmetrical. One of the more asymmetrical games, especially once you get the expansion. But even without the expansion, it's very asymmetrical in terms of your faction abilities and cards and things like that. You have a lot of player interaction, which like actual play, like politics. Like dealing with who's at the table with you is going to affect how you play with them, right? Like that guy's very aggressive and he's probably going to betray me right away as soon as he gets the chance. That guy is a warmonger. That guy doesn't like conflict. So how you play is very, very much it affects the theme. And this is, to me, part of the mechanics. The politics is the main mechanic of this game. And so I think that carries it very, very well. And on top of that, the other things we've talked about, like artwork, like it's a beautiful game. It's got wonderful pieces, wonderful art. It's a huge, cool looking galaxy map. The mechanics are, a lot of people look at it and feel overwhelmed by all the rules and things that are going on. But once people have played a couple rounds, most people say, well, it's actually fairly simple to play, which I think is, so there's a lot of things going on, which keeps you very involved. I would say out of standard board games, I would say that's the most thematic, but I have 4 things I thought of that I think are even more thematic.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's still on my list of games to play. I still have never played Twilight Imperium,
which I'm up for whenever you have a day to set aside, and I have a day to set aside.
Yeah, it's just that's I think the big thing that's keeping me from it is that you kind of need a day to set aside to learn and play it the first time. Yeah. But oh, cool. Yeah, I figured that one would be on your list at some point. I just wasn't sure where. So neat to see this. Your number 4 or number 5. Sorry. Ooh, My number four, though, as we move into the number fours, is actually my favorite game of all time, and it is Sentinels of the Multiverse. Yeah, this one is it's another one. It's right in there with Betrayal, and maybe there's some nostalgia factor that goes in with this. It was one of the first board games that I bought, and it's one of the games that I feel is the best at making you feel like a superhero. The game is a modular deck system. So every player will get their hero deck. So if I'm going to be Unity, I'm going to grab the deck for the character Unity. And my deck is unique to my character. So it has all of my equipment, all of my ongoings, all of my hero powers. And so anything that this character is going to do is built into that deck. And then all of the characters feel a little bit different. Obviously, the earlier expansions were a little more similar between the characters, and some of their later expansions get a little bit crazier with the characters. But it's great. It's a cooperative game. Everybody gets their own deck for their heroes, and then you play against this villain, and the villain has their own deck. And then you play in an environment, and that is its own deck as well. So because it's a modular deck system, the replayability of this game is through the charts because you can change up your hero teams, you can change your villain you're playing against, you can change your environment that you're playing in, and all of those things just mesh together in this very very numbers-based superhero game.
Right.
A lot of people, if they don't like the game, it's because of the quote-unquote math aspect of it. You do have to keep track of a lot of different moving pieces, different buffs on characters, plus and minuses, and then you're constantly calculating who has the most health, etc. Right?
Right.
So that would be the one thing that people typically take as a drawback to the game. But again, just the feeling that I get when I play this game is that I can kind of personify as this hero taking on this villain. And that's what I've always loved about the Sentinels of the Multiverse game.
Right on. I'm not sure if I've played that one or not, because I think I sometimes get that one mixed up with Legendary.
Oh yeah, no, different, very different than Legendary. Legendary is a deck building game where you kind of pick the heroes and those become a hero deck, and then you're building your deck out of that.
That's definitely the one I've played.
Pool.
That's the one I've played. Yeah.
Yeah, so that one is a deck builder versus a modular deck system.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. My number 4 is Captain Sonar.
Oh, that's such a good pick.
Yeah, Captain Sonar, and I've never been in a war, and I've never been on a submarine, but I think this is probably as close you could experience without actually doing any of those things, because it's a real-time game. It's 2 teams. Each team, you're going to have different offices. You're going to have like a captain. You're going to have a radio guy, a sonar. I forget all the positions, but you all have a role on this submarine, and you're trying to catch the other sub and shoot it down. But it's real time. Like you're chasing them while they're fleeing you, and you all have your different. You're all shouting or not if you're trying to keep your thing secret that you're doing. And so you're trying to ping the other submarine. It gets supposed to fire the tornado. The other trying to hide, get away from you. It's very urgent. It's got all the things I think we've been talking about. It's asymmetrical, time based. Again, I feel can add a lot to theme when you want to create that sense of urgency and stuff. Does a fantastic job. Not, I would say, remotely my favorite game. It's a little stressful, but definitely I found it thematic.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's a game that you can play with 8 people, and I think it actually does play best at 8 people, having the full
so everybody has one
subs.
job.
Yeah, and you were mentioning that stressful component of it. I do feel like some of the roles are a lot less stressful than others. So if you do get people who are a little bit standoffish because of the time component to it, you can put them on a little bit of an easier role, and then they're just kind of manning the weaponry, right? And it's every time you move, you just cross off 1 X, and that's all you have to do, right? Like that's your job, kind of thing. So, but yeah, really good pick. I completely spaced on that game. Haven't played it in so long, but I think that is a really good pick for a thematic game. Cool. So my number 3, I gave to Tidal Blades. So Tidal Blades is a worker placement game that I picked off Kickstarter. And in the game, you are essentially competing in a tournament to try to impress the judge as you are training to become what is known as a Tidal Blade in this universe. The Tidal Blades are the citizens that have trained to fight the monsters of the fold. The theme comes through because all of the cards that you're doing, all of the quests that you're trying to complete in the game are all these different tricks and stunts, and you have to go to these different arenas, which are the worker placement actions throughout the game. And as you're performing these stunts, if you do the stunt in the right arena, you're in front of the judge and you get bonus points for it, kind of thing. And at the end of the game, whoever impressed the judge the most is the champion and they get bonus points for it, kind of thing, right? So it becomes this almost point salad type of game as you're just trying to build up your character's power and then go fight some monsters over on the side as well. So yeah, that's my number 3, Tidal Blades. It's a bit longer of a worker placement game, but it's also it's an interesting one where it takes a long time to play it, but you always feel like you don't have enough time.
Yeah. Okay, my number 3, I haven't played that one either, so I can't really comment on it.
We got to get you over to play some board games, Bryant.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so my number 3, incredibly immersive to the point. This game's not even fun. It's very interesting, and it's, I think, fun. Fun can't describe it though. It's called This War of Mine, and basically you're playing the roles of civilians in a city under siege during a war, and you're basically just trying to eke by and survive, right? And there's roaming gangs that you got to compete with. There's other like starving children you got to deal with, help or not, depending on your decisions, because everything you do costs you food or time or whatever, right? It's very grim, and the people who made this game actually interviewed a lot of people from Sarajevo who lived through, it was like a 1400-day siege that they lived through. So they've actually, they interviewed people that lived through this sort of a scenario to make it as realistic as possible. It's a survival game. And I think I've played a couple times, not come close to winning. It's very difficult. But it's hard. And some of the scenarios that come up are just so grim. This is not a game I would play for fun. This is kind of a game you play to test your mettle. So it's more of I would call it more of a puzzle than a game. There's no laughs, but it's really well done. And I think the fact that it's so grim, given the theme of it, I think is appropriate, right? So you're dealing with like, okay, this child, you can go out and help this child and give them the last bit of your food, and you might die tonight. And if you don't, next morning you might see their body lying there on the street. That sort of thing you're dealing with. Yeah,
it's you or them kind of thing, and it's the tough choices.
But then at the same time, it might pay off. You don't know. It's like I give them food, then they brought me something that I needed. So you're always making these types of decisions as a group. It's a cooperative.
Yeah, my girlfriend has played the video game, which I think the board game was an adaptation of that, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure which one came first, but
yeah, either way, I've never played the board game myself. I've heard good things about it, but yeah, it's neat. It's a very different concept for a game.
Yeah,
that's cool. Okay, so my number 2 is more of a fantasy theme. In this game, you are on a ship called the Manticore, and you have been transported from New York into this mystical set of islands. This game is called Sleeping Gods, and it is a Ryan Lockett game from Red Raven Games. And during the game, you are essentially just a ship's crew, and you are exploring this world to try to find these totems that are going to help you resurrect the gods so that you can get home, because the gods have brought you there and they're the only ones that can send you back. The game plays differently than a lot of other games play, because on your turn, you can move or you can explore. And if you choose to explore, you are reading a narrative storybook, and then you are making a decision based on that storybook's action. Depending on the decision you make, you may have to do a cunning check or a strength check. Well, if your crew members have been training to be stronger, it's easier for you to do the strength-based checks. If your crew members are a little bit more cunning, then maybe you can sneak around the other side. There's some combat in the game, which is a very unique puzzle. And yeah, there's the randomness of the game is basically the fate deck that you're drawing different numbers off the top of the deck, but those numbers are also your skill cards. So if you start equipping the right skills to your characters, you can kind of make your skill deck stronger because it'll have higher numbers in it. It's an interesting game, and it's really about the journey. I've played through one full campaign with just myself and my girlfriend. We're playing through a second campaign of it now, and even though we know some of the things that are coming up, there's so much of a world to explore that you just really want to sink your teeth into a different area. So you just go off somewhere in some uncharted sea and start to explore and talk to the locals, and you learn their stories, and then you go do quests for them, and it's just a really unique game. And yeah, I feel like it's a really fun theme to get into, and it's a really fun journey to be on. And that's my number 2, Sleeping Gods.
That's awesome. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't this one of your top for the prettiest games also?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like your description, I haven't played this one either, but by description, it sounds kind of like Arabian Nights, but maybe not quite as random.
Yeah, potentially. I haven't played Arabian Nights before, but I've heard that it is very story driven. It's you go on like these quests, and you're reading
same
narrative.
Thing. You're reading
right?
narratives, and then you make decisions. You have skills that you have to match against. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. Now, so my number 2, I might be cheating, but I also suspect this could be your number 1.
Oh, you think so?
Maybe, because I put genre as opposed to a specific game, because I think any game in this genre qualifies. That is tabletop role-playing games.
Okay.
So this could be Dungeons and Dragons, Exalted, GURPS, Genesis. There's lots of them. I think they all function primarily the same way, regardless of what the mechanics are. But it's hard to be more immersive than a game where you're literally immersing yourself into a character, into a world, and choosing what you're doing in that world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to beat. And I could only think of one thing that could possibly beat it.
And I'm going to guess that's your number 1 then.
Yeah.
It's the one that beats it.
There's one that beats it, I think.
No, it's a good pick. I totally get it. I did not put role-playing games on my list. I consider them, though they are typically tabletop games, I was looking more for thematic board games in this one.
That's fair enough. I suspected I was cheating a little bit.
Yeah, it's your list. You can cheat as much as you want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's why I left it off the list. I did consider it and started thinking like, yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, that's a pretty key obvious choice. And actually one of the ones that made my short list was D6, which I think I talked about in one of my other lists, which is kind of the spoof on Dungeons and Dragons, which I do feel carries the theme quite well. But yeah, I left it off because I consider them to be 2 different genres of games: role-playing game versus board game.
That's very fair.
But okay, so my number 1, and I think you say you have the best one, but I think this one will be hard to beat. Is my number 1 is Chronicles of Crime.
Okay.
So Chronicles of Crime, you are playing the role of a detective, and it is an app-driven game. And the theme for this game, I feel, really shines. It's one of the things that I really like about the game. It's one of those types of games, kind of like Sleeping Gods, where the journey is more important than the actual game mechanics. In this game, you start off and you're called into your commanding officer's office, and he basically lays out this crime for you. Somebody's been murdered at this location. Go there and talk to them. And so now you're taking your phone, which has the Chronicles of Crime app on it, and you scan the location and you move to that location. And then you scan the person that you want to talk to, and the text comes up on your screen, and you talk to them. And then you say, okay, well, what do you want to ask this person about? Well, I have no clues here, so I better go search a crime scene. You click search a crime scene. Now you're looking on your phone, and you're actually using kind of a 3D camera on your phone to actually see the crime scene. And while you're looking around this crime scene, you are telling your other allies what you're seeing, what you're physically seeing on the phone, and they are pulling out cards that have keywords. So, oh yeah, I see this gun on the ground. Okay, well, I'll pull out the firearms card. Oh, there's some blood over here. There's some clothes off to the side and some trash bags. So you pull out these cards. Now you're scanning the cards to see if those are actually clues related to your case. Now, when you go back and talk to the witness, you scan her card to talk to her, and then scan the firearms to ask her about the gun. And then it lays out the story for you as you go through that. And you really do feel like you are kind of pulling threads on this storyline. And as you keep pulling and as you pull the right thread, more locations open up, more people open up, and this thing sprawls across your table, much like you see in the movies with the red threads going along to all of the pictures and stuff. Anyway, it's a great game. It makes you kind of feel as I imagine a detective would feel as they're trying to solve a case. That's my number 1 is Chronicles of Crime.
And that does sound like a really brilliant concept. The ability to actually kind of look around it's kind of like an AR, augmented reality kind of feature.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, AR would be if it was pulling the 3D objects into your living room.
Yeah.
This one it's just 3D or 360.
It's a 360-degree camera.
360-degree camera. Yeah.
Still, I think that's a brilliant concept. All right, now my number one. I'm sort of cheating again.
Oh, come on.
But out of all the gaming experience that I've had, this was far the most immersive, and that is mega games. And so I've done one mega game. It's kind of a multi-hour thing.
Yep.
And I have a whole video explaining the one I did. I'll link to it in the description here, because I'm not going to explain. I could talk about that for like an hour. I've witnessed the fall of humanity, because the thing about it is, so how it works. The one I did was based basically on Battlestar Galactica. So it was a fleet of ships that were the last. Earth was destroyed. Any ships that were in space at the time of its destruction were still together trying to survive, but the aliens who destroyed it are still chasing you down, and you strongly suspect there are people in your fleet who belong to or sympathize with the alien faction, right? And so everyone's on a ship, and each ship has different things it produces and different things it needs. So you might be on a mining ship that can mine things that can be sent to the refinery ship to create fuel. You might have a ship that can create water, one that creates food, etc. But they don't all have everything they need. So you have to go around and negotiate. So everyone on the ship has a different role. I was a politician, so I would have to meet with the president of the surviving humans. We'd have meetings, create laws, but in the meantime, there might be a battle going on that the first officers and the captains would be dealing with. The engineers would be basically playing a worker placement game, trying to manage their individual ships. So the engineers didn't usually leave their ships. The first officers would have to go around trying to negotiate with the other ships for stuff they needed. And it was just really interesting to watch, because in the very beginning, you could see how everyone was trying so hard to work together. And you described this in one of your earlier games, how pretty soon, resources start to get tight. People started hiding their resources, so people couldn't see what they had. We had to pass a law to say you couldn't do that. There was a conflict with the admiral of our fleet, who got shot down by one of our ships. Some ships got lost in a space jump, and my ship had to go back and try to find them, only to find out they'd been sabotaged because we thought they'd betrayed us. And then the government basically just collapsed at some point, and everybody was doing all sorts of wild and crazy. It was so you have every element there. You got the really the diverse roles that you're playing at the same time. So the reason I put this above a normal tabletop role-playing game is because it's kind of like having a whole bunch of tabletop role-playing games, playing the same game and interacting with each other while each doing their own quests, right?
Yeah, it sounds similar to a Dungeons and Dragons epic.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been involved in many of those, but I've actually DM'd an epic before. They're really neat experiences where you can have 6 different tables of Dungeons and Dragons being played, and there's an overarching story between the 6 tables that they're all trying to work towards the same goal, just doing different aspects of it.
And I would say sort of like that, but in the sense that you can't really always be at the same table. You're constantly going to the other tables to interact with them. So for example, there was another one that was an alien invasion, and you'd each belong. Your table might be a country, but you might be a UN appointee from that country. So you're never with your country's table. You're actually at the UN table. Or you could be a research scientist working with other research scientists from around the world trying to develop weapons to fight the aliens. And
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely a different way of role playing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was
it's cool.
Yeah, it was an absolutely fantastic experience. Hard to find them going on to do them, and a little pricey. So it's a rare experience. But I would say if you get a chance to do it.
Yeah, they do take a lot of coordination, a lot of dedication from.
Well, there's a team of people running it. Yeah, a huge team of people have to run it. And this was at Shucks where I did mine a few years ago, and there was a group from Australia, and that's all they did all weekend. Like they did this mega game.
I could see it. Yeah, that's cool.
All right, well, that's it for me. I declare myself the winner.
Of course you do. Yeah.
But you have a vote too. So
I'll declare the winner to be the guy who made it about board games.
Oh, yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair. I cheated. I tried to cheat my way to victory, and it came back to bite me.
It's all good. No, they're neat experiences, and they're neat things to mention for sure. And if somebody is looking for a very thematic experience, I think both your top two options are good thematic
Yeah, and you know what?
experiences.
If I had the time and the funds, I would love to set up mega games like that. I think that would be a wonderful company to own.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks, Matt, for this top 10. And I guess we'll see all of you guys next week for another
Alrighty.
playing session.